In this lesson, we'll talk a little bit more about integration between ZBrush and other applications. So ZBrush works actually really well with other applications, even though there's a ton of tools that you can use here in ZBrush to create your geometry. At some point, you may want to transfer your project to another application or move it down the pipeline. If you're working on something like a game, you need to start to get the maps and the low-res geometry put back together and move it on down. So there's actually a lot of ways, different ways that you can export and import geometry from other applications into ZBrush. So in the tool palette, we kind of talked about this. The import and export functionality are in here. So if we go to import, you want to bring geometry in. You can bring an OBJ in, a .ma file in from Maya if you want to do that. Same thing with export. You can export out an OBJ or a .ma file. OBJs will be pretty much readable by almost any application, 3D application that you are going to be using. You should be able to bring in an OBJ just fine. It's just kind of basic stripped down geometry in there. So that you can transfer that way, and then you could reassemble everything with your maps. So we talked about how to export those maps. You could export your geometry and then reassemble those in your other application. You can do that. You can also use GoZ to kind of create a bridge and work back and forth between ZBrush. So if I wanted to, for instance, send this geometry over to Maya to be able to set up, and I want it to get the low-res geometry, and then I also want to get the normal map and the texture map. So right now I have this just at its highest level, and if you look under texture map, I have the texture map on, and also I have a normal map that's been created, and it's turned on at the moment. So all I have to do now is hit this GoZ. Now up here you'll see there's a GoZ button. There's a button next to it that says all, and then one that says visible, and then a little R. So if you hit the little R, it's going to tell you what applications are currently connected to ZBrush and which one is the current GoZ application. So in this instance, we have the possibility of sending it to Cinema 4D, 3D Studio Max, Maya, so forth. But Maya, if we hit the GoZ button, is what it's going to send it to. So here's where we can change that if we'd like to instead send it to Max. So with that selected, all we have to do now is hit GoZ, and it'll automatically, assuming we have Maya, and if you open this up and it shows that means you do. So if you hit GoZ, it's going to automatically open up Maya and bring in our geometry. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is what it brought up in Maya. So we've got our low-res geometry just brought up in the middle of the scene. So you can see it doesn't really look like what we want. We do have the geometry in here. Let's go ahead and go to normals, and let's soften those normals. So it kind of cleans things up a little bit. I'm going to turn off the grid as well. So, but it's not only brought in the geometry, it's actually also brought in a material and set it up. So if we go to our attribute editor, we can take a look at our material. We actually have a map that's piped into the color and a map that's piped into the bump mapping. So let's see if we can see those in our viewport. So to do that, we'll go to shading, turn on our hardware texturing. So you can see we actually have our color texture in here. Okay, our material is a little bit too shiny, so we can modify our material, change that up a little bit. Okay. And now what we want to do is get our normal map on here and see it and be able to see it. So to do that, we'll go into the renderer and we'll turn on high quality, and this will allow us to see now the normal map. So here we've got not the detail that we've sculpted, but a map that's representing that detail that's been applied now to our low-res mesh based on the UVs that we created. Okay. Now, if we wanted to bring in another piece of geometry, now we'd like to, I'll just use something really simple like a torus here. Let's say we now want to create some geometry, and I don't know, we want to kind of put it on his head. We want some base geometry to use back in ZBrush, and we want to build that maybe here in Maya. We've seen something that we want to add. We can send that back over to ZBrush, and if we look in our preferences under GoZ, you'll see we have a lot of different options here. Here we have one for import as a subtool, okay, instead of creating a new tool, so we could import it as a subtool here. So let's go back into Maya. We'll go into our Go ZBrush shelf here, and we'll just go ahead and hit GoZ. And then it'll take us back to ZBrush. And now that torus has been added to our scene. So we can really quickly just add some geometry in our other application and send it back over to ZBrush to begin working on. So if you're more comfortable building models in other applications, or you bring it over into Maya and you see something that you can change really quickly and send it back over to ZBrush, it creates a nice little bridge between those two, and then we can come in and start to manipulate those. You can see that torus located there. Okay. Now that's bringing in the low res over with maps. What if you just want to create a nice render and you don't really want to have to create a nice low res piece of geometry? Let's go ahead and delete this. You don't want to have to go back in and retopologize. You have a nice high res piece, and all you really want to do is make it so that you can take it into Maya, reduce the poly count so that you can deal with it in Maya and render it out. Well, we can use a really cool plugin called Decimation Master to do that. So if I increase this to its highest level where we've got all of the detail, we currently have looks like 4 million polygons on this. Okay, so we can hover over that and see. So that's a lot of polygons, and we want to maintain as much of the look of this as we can, but we want to get the polygon count lowered down. So we can use Decimation Master to do that. If we go to Preferences, under Decimation Master, you can see that we have some options here. And so what I want to do is I want to use and keep the poly paint. Okay, and so that'll allow us to keep the texture of the color. So if you brought this into something like Topogun, you'd want to keep this, and then that would allow you to keep the vertex color. Otherwise, you can choose to keep the UVs. Like if you have a texture created, you can in Z plugin under Decimation Master, you can choose to keep the UVs, and that will allow you to keep the actual texture map. So let's say that we do want to keep the UVs because we want to be able to apply our texture. So we'll freeze the borders as well. And this is kind of a three-step process here. So what we'd want to do is pre-process what we're going to decimate first. Now we're only going to be decimating this one piece, so we'll go ahead and pre-process that. All right, so once that's pre-processed, now we can begin decimating. So let's take a quick look at our polyframe. There is the current sort of layout. You can just get an idea of how that's laid out based on the lines that you see there. So keep that in mind as we go through this process. So we'll turn off polyframe. Now we're going to go down to the decimation area. So here's the percentage of decimation. You can also put in the number of polygons in thousands or the number of points that you want if you have a number that you're shooting for. Let's go ahead and just leave that on 20% decimation, and let's say decimate current. So we have the current subtool pre-processed, so this will allow us to decimate it, and the decimation will actually happen very quickly. Now visually, nothing really happened. You can't really tell too much of a difference here, but if we take a look at this, you can see now my poly count is down to 1.7 million, down from 4 million. So we have taken a drastic reduction in the polygon count here. If we turn on our polyframe, you can see, wow, it looks really dense, but actually it has about a 20% of the polygons that we had before. Okay, the thing is they're optimized to get the exact look that you're looking for. So you're not talking about any sort of subdivision levels or anything like that. This is just strictly optimized to get the look of that high res. Now the cool thing is we can go back in here if we say, oh, you know, it's still a little bit too high. Let's see how low we can get it. So we'll turn off polyframe, and we'll just keep an eye on the details. And so we'll go back in here, and let's set this down to maybe 15%, and let's decimate current. I still really am not seeing that much degradation in the mesh, so we can keep going. Go down to, let's try 10%. We'll decimate that. Take a look at the polygon count. So now if we go over here, you can see we're looking at about 800,000 polygons. We can go even lower. So going down to 5% and decimating that. And eventually, once you get to a low enough value, you'll start to see some artifacting in here. But as of yet, I think we're pretty good. So at this point, we're down to 179,000 polygons, down from 4 million. And looking at this, you really can't tell a whole lot of difference. So now at this point, we could just take this geometry and send it right over to Maya. Okay, we have the texture map here still. So let's go ahead and hit Go Z. Now, so here you can see we've got in Maya now our high res and our low res. So if we go into the outliner, and I'm just going to get rid of that torus, and I'll get rid of the low res. Now you can see we don't need any normal map. All that detail has come through. And this is great if you just want to create a render. So we could set up a material in here or multiple materials, set up lights, and do a render, assuming that we're not going to be rigging and animating this guy, because this dense geometry is not really suited for that. It's really suited just to get this out and be able to sort of work with it and sort of just render it out if we want to do that. Or, we're not going to be blending facial shapes or anything like that. We're not going to be doing any sort of animation. So Decimation Master is a great tool for getting geometry out if you need to get it out just to render it, if you're not going to be creating sort of a production model. Or if you want to do retopology in another application, you could decimate your high res, bring it into that other application. You've got your high res geometry at a much lower polygon level, and then you can draw your new topology over the top of that. So that's another option as well. So that's a look at integration with ZBrush and other applications. And that also brings us to the end of our introduction to ZBrush. So I hope you've enjoyed the time that we had together. I know it's been a long process going through this, and we're only able to skim the surface of a lot of the tools here in ZBrush just because there's so much available to you, as from things like Dynamesh and Z-spheres, Shadowbox, to lots of options for creating base geometry, so many options for sculpting and painting, and then manipulating your geometry and working with subtools, getting the maps out, Decimation Master and the multi-map export. There's so much to talk about. If you're interested in delving any more deeply into any of those things, we do have a lot of material on our website at Digital Tutors that you can check out that will go into more depth on some of those. So make sure to check those out if you're interested. So hopefully you've got a good overview now of working in ZBrush. It's can be a little intimidating at first, but now you've got the tools to begin working on your own projects here in ZBrush. So get started.